Tell your story.
Change the conversation.
Organized by students. TEDxYouth at SHC.
I was 15 when I first learned how to properly wash my hands. I was an 8th grader in science class. It was the beginning of the pandemic, and my teacher decided to stop her lesson 10 minutes before the bell rang to display a chart on the board. And this chart showed us the 7 steps to correctly washing your hands. She explained how important it was and how only 5% of the population know how to wash their hands correctly. Then she had us put down our pencils and go through the motions with her, and she had us do each step about 2 or 3 times. And I remember it being quite funny. Everyone was laughing. I mean, we were middle schoolers, only now correctly learning how to wash our hands. But I knew deep down everyone was thinking, wow, I have not been doing this before. Going back home, I remember overhearing my parents watching the news of COVID cases increasing and overcrowding hospitals. And it took me back to class that day. This simple lesson on how to correctly wash our hands and protect ourselves from germs. And I thought to myself, how mindful, how wonderful that instead of my teacher explaining how scary this new virus was and frightening the students, she made a lesson of it. She used it as an opportunity to give wisdom, share goodness. My teacher, she reframed the pandemic. Now fast forward a couple weeks and I'm in my bedroom. Schools around the world closed and a shift to distance learning. For me, loud dismissal bells, crowded hallways, and school lunch were all replaced by my chair, my desk, and my computer. And to make matters worse, my 8th grade outdoor education trip to Catalina Island was canceled, the trip that I had been looking forward to since the 4th grade. I felt overwhelmed and devastated. And like millions around the world, we lacked social interaction and a sense of community. Then I remembered my science teacher who had brought out the good in the bad, who had reframed the negative. It was then I realized I too had the power to reframe. So instead of sitting in front of the news and being frightened and worried by these complex ideas of viral strains, aerosols, flattening the curve, and quarantining, I, as many young people around the world, questioned and took an interest in science. I quickly became intrigued and started joining family conversations on speedy vaccine production and new rapid PCR tests. I even joined my school's science club, where twice a week for 2 hours I would listen to scientists and doctors on a variety of topics ranging from CRISPR to cancer treatment. Throughout this journey of exploration, me truly taking in the time that I had and society's new focus on science, I learned about new technologies. And one of my favorite technologies was cold plasma, which according to the University of Michigan can inactivate an airborne virus. Truly amazing. By learning and researching about science, I became hopeful. I became hopeful about scientific innovation and our capacity to learn and react. With this new perspective, I hope now to pursue a career in the sciences and use what I learned at home during COVID as a foundation from which to grow. And the best part about the story that I'm telling you here today is that I wasn't alone. Many people during the pandemic reframed and found their passion. We finally had time to pause and explore creative outlets. People found new hobbies. People began baking bread. They exchanged recipes and shared sourdough starters. People made music. People created art. People danced, and they exercised outdoors. We even got closer to our families. As an article according to the Harvard Gazette says, fathers felt closer to their children with newfound time at home. We also learned how to teach virtually, allowing education to reach more people. Schools are now employing health safety measures. According to the National Education Association, there's now an increased focus on finding school nurses and installing ventilation systems in classrooms to circulate the air. Healthcare we see is evolving with a new wave of telemedicine, which, according to the CDC, we can now meet with doctors virtually, which is now increasing the access to healthcare. Now, looking back at the pandemic, we tend to only see the bad. And this is warranted. We lost valuable times in schools, many small businesses closed, and let's not forget that 7 million people died globally. In our process of finding positive outcomes, we must be careful not to minimize what we have lost. By accepting positive changes in developing scientific interest, creating new hobbies, and improving education, we must make sure to honor those who've passed. And by reframing, we can. We make a conscious decision to include the good. Now, this doesn't mean shifting our attention only to the good. All we are doing is widening our scope to see the bigger picture. Only when we do this are we able to make connections between the good and the bad, learn new lessons, dream new possibilities, make new decisions, and create new ways of living. So let us all come together. Take in this moment of reflection and look back. Look back even beyond the pandemic and remember this. With every challenge lies the opportunity for growth. Thank you.